kids, do you like violence? Sorry, I mean, do you like previews? This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, so use the link in the description below to get 5% off your order and help support the show for sealed product and singles from everything from Lord of the Rings right through to All Will Be One that's currently out and all that future goodness. With the birth of my child, I only had room or space to make a couple of videos, so I've been kind of away from keyboard, AFK for 2 weeks or so, and it's kind of been a nice refresh. I've hardly touched Magic at all. I played a ton of Marvel Snap though. That progression system's still and I haven't touched any Magic. It's kind of been refreshing. It's kind of nice to have that time off. But I'm trying to get back to the grind, and here we are, straight back into another preview season as we begin the previews for the Lord of the Rings set. We had a couple of sneak peeks thanks to IGN yesterday, and as of today, we'll be getting more previews. The first look, we're probably going to see Frodo or Gollum, for example. So there'll be another follow-up video tomorrow. So if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, and why don't you click the link down below and give me all your money. So let's talk about what we've seen so far. There are 5 basic lands that are all done in this map style for Lord of the Rings. Now people might be wondering why maps, because maps are a big part of Lord of the Rings. There are maps all of Middle Earth. It's kind of, there's this interesting thing about Lord of the Rings where everything is kind of recorded and documented in a sense that there are hard facts about lore and space and where places are, how distant things are from each other. And maps and languages play a big part in that. It's kind of like an alternate history as well as a fantasy world. So maps are a huge part of the Tolkien identity of Lord of the Rings as a thing. And these are gorgeous. There is a complaint that they all look like forests, primarily because they've all got forests on them. Like the Shire is the plains. It's the Shire location where Hobbiton is, where the hobbits come from if you're really not that versed in Lord of the Rings. And there's just forest lands all over the place. And I mean, yeah, sure, it's a fair enough criticism. From a distance, these will read as forests, and I will probably find that mildly frustrating at some point in the next couple of years. But I love the idea of it. It's so good. It's so on point for Lord of the Rings. The island again, we see the Belaga Sea, and this is where I start to look like a fucking idiot because I'm not quite sure where this is. Is this where they do the boat down the river bit with the big statues? Here you go, you're seeing my Lord of the Rings knowledge fall apart. But again, we see forests and hills and plain land. That's just how it works when you look at a Europe-esque sort of part of the world that's being represented on maps. You're going to have forests and plains and other bits, but I don't think that matters. Maybe they could have color graded these a bit stronger. Maybe the island could have had better blue tones in the water and the swamp could have been darker and more black. But I guess, actually no, I was going to say that there's a juxtaposition between Mordor itself and the surrounding area because that's the whole point of Mordor, right? It is a wasteland, an apocalyptic environment compared to the rest of Middle-earth. But then again, the green versus the grey here isn't as much of a juxtaposition as it could have been. The contrast of colour could have been stronger. The mountains show the White Mountains, Rohan and Gondor, and the forest is Mirkwood, which makes a lot of sense with the Misty Mountains on the left-hand side there as well. I love these. I think they're really, really good. They're some of my favourite alternate frame, alternate art, alternate full arts we've had in a while. There's been this thing where we've seen a lot of like abstract symbols of like Theros and stuff like that, and the Phyrexianized symbols on lands, and they, although they can look cool, I don't like them too much. They look a bit too basic, a little bit too reductive in a way. And we obviously see windows into worlds through pieces of art on lands. To get maps, I think, is a really unique idea. And like I said, it's a unique idea that really fits with the framework of a really mapped out, to use the term, a really mapped out world like the realms of Middle-earth. Then we were shown Gandalf the Grey, a 5-mana 3/4 avatar wizard in blue-red. Yeah, I wasn't expecting Gandalf the Grey to be blue-red, if I'm honest with you, but I guess it is the spell slinger like archetypes often in blue-red. Although again, I wouldn't have said that Gandalf the Grey, especially from his depictions in the main storyline of Lord of the Rings, as much of a spellcaster. Honest, Gandalf the Grey is a legendary creature avatar wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You may tap or untap target permanent. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copies and put Gandalf on top of his own library. So essentially, there are 4 pips, 4 effects that happen when you cast an instant or sorcery spell. One of them has to be chosen, although they do have like a may effect in them, like you may tap or untap with the first one, I guess, but you have to pick at least one of the 4. So eventually Gandalf the Grey goes away. I guess you can't rely on him to complete the adventure, kind of like we have when he disappears for a bit in Lord of the Rings upon fighting the Balrog. But this is where we start to struggle with crossovers, right? Because there's a lot more focus on mechanically and thematically what a card does. Because this doesn't feel like Gandalf the Grey that I've grown up watching in the in the Peter Jackson movies at least. I guess Peter Jackson's going to have a really heavy burden on what we know as Lord of the Rings, because the magic in the Peter Jackson movies is a lot more subtle, especially from Gandalf himself. He hardly casts any spells throughout the runtime of all three movies, and when he does cast spells, they're really subtle. Like when he's Gandalf the White, the coming of the sun against the Uruk-hai at Helm's Deep and such, the spells are really, really subtle. So for him to be a spell slinger is really strange, but I guess he is the big wizard. That's not his term. That's not a phrase that everyone describes him as, but he is one of the wizards of Lord of the Rings, so it'd be weird for him not to be involved with spells, I guess. So mechanically, I don't really feel it. I don't really get it. So he's a 5 mana 3/4 creature that has 4 effects, 1-time shot each one whenever you cast a spell, and like 3 of them are pretty bad. Untapping or tapping a permanent is a thing that can be good, as we're going to talk about in a moment with the One Ring. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent is something in 1v1 that is a reasonable effect from a trigger from a spell or instant or sorcery, but in Commander it kind of sucks. And let's be honest, a 5 mana 3/4 wizard like this that resets itself to the top of the deck is not going to see much play in Modern. The copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, you may choose new targets for that copy, is obviously insane. Casting a Time Warp, copying it, and then casting another cantrip to put him back into your library, untapping and casting him again can get you some infinite combos. I think Gandalf the Grey will go infinite quite easily, I guess, just off the back of that middle one, that third one. But again, it still seems relatively underwhelming for a 5 mana 3/4. Maybe I'm just not expanding my mind enough, or considering the fact that duplicating extra turn spells is kind of dumb. I guess he is just a commander that sits in play and doubles a time stretch or an extra pay or whatever. So I guess that is just by virtue very, very powerful. Just everything else about him is quite weak. And that's fine. I don't think every single key character from Lord of the Rings has to wreck everything. I am a bit disappointed that I don't think we'll see a Gandalf the Grey modern deck, perhaps. But I think of all the characters in Lord of the Rings that I love the most, it's Gandalf and Gimli, and this one just doesn't excite me. I'm not clambering to build this. So fingers crossed that Gimli gives us the dwarf commander we've all been waiting for. I do have to say though, the alternate art thing with this Lord of the Rings frame, with the inscription, blue on one side, red on the other, and then the alternate art of him falling off the bridge at Khazad-dûm or whatever it's called. I've probably fucking butchered that pronunciation. I probably added a syllable that isn't there. I'm not going to look it up. I'm not a professional. But this is fucking gorgeous. This is beautiful. I actually love the frame and the art and how the frame and the art come together. I don't know if all of the arts and frames will look this good. I think the red with the blue-red sort of like just looks particularly good. I do want to see how this looks in like green-white, for example, when we get a Bilbo that's basically Garok-Teeg or similar. And then we have the One Ring to rule them all. The 4 mana legendary artifact that is indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. And tap it, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. This thing is deceptively nuts. I've seen people saying that it's not good enough. It's a bit underwhelming for the One Ring. I've seen other people say, why is this not Soul Ring? Don't forget, this is a modern, straight to legal in modern sets. We're not going to get Soul Ring in the core set. We will, of course, get it in the Commander products. Maybe we'll see a One Ring reference there. But this thing is fucking bonkers. So essentially, it is a 4 mana artifact that is indestructible. When it enters the battlefield, if you have cast it, which was what I'm thinking you're going to do, you're not going to be cheating this out. You're going to be casting this in Legacy of Soul Lands, perhaps, or maybe of Rituals and Spell-Based Combo in other formats. Once you cast it, you get protection for a turn, and you get protection from everything, by the way. So bearing in mind, you can't target yourself with an extra turn spell once you've given yourself protection from everything, because you have protection from sorceries, but what it means is that your opponent can't combo off. So you slam this off your Soul Lands, and your opponent can't Tendrils you out, they can't hit you with a Marit Lage, they can't Cephalid Constable you to death either, by milling you out either. There's a lot of things they just can't do. They can't hand attack you if we move away from like game-winning combos. They can't use Thoughtseize to look at your hand. Your permanents are accessible, so there's a balancing factor there of that. Someone could still Shattering Spree your board, because I think this is going to show up in decks that play a lot of artifacts, if I'm honest with you. Someone could Shattering Spree your board, but it won't kill the One Ring. And then when you draw the One Ring as well and play it, not only do you get that protection, but you can tap it to draw 1 card immediately, and on the following turn, when you tap it again, you'll have 2 burden counters. You've lost 1 life total from the first burden counter on untapping, and then you draw another 2. So you've got draw 3 strapped to this thing across 2 turns, which you will get thanks to the protection. And if you go to a 3rd turn, you're drawing 5 or 6. It gets nutty. And I just want to point out that tapping to simply draw a singular card is such an unusual ability on artifacts that people don't realise how rare it actually is. I went looking, I went fucking digging. Urza's Blueprint is probably the closest we've got to this, which is a 6 mana artifact with fucking Echo. So you can't even cheat it into play because you got to pay the 4 mana next turn. You can't flicker it, you got to pay the 4 mana next turn. And just hard casting means it's a 12 mana investment to draw 2 cards. Urza's Blueprint fucking sucks. I've done a whole video talking about how bad this card actually is. That's probably the closest we've got to this in the history of Magic. And this card was printed 20 plus years ago. I just want to highlight how powerful tapping to draw a card in colourless and how unusual it is for Wizards to give that to us with no other caveat beyond, I guess, losing life at the beginning of the turn. I also want to point out that I think this is a very cool way of depicting the One Ring. Instead of making it a mana rock that we all expected, or even an equipment in that sense, because people shouldn't be wearing the One Ring if things are going well. But having it be a thing that people cannot equip, and you simply have it and you utilize the burden of it for knowledge and power, but that knowledge and power will eventually kill you, is good. I do wonder if it should be more of a burden. I guess a little bit of life loss is a very minor price to pay for the cost of drawing multiple cards. Also, the ability of being able to give yourself protection for 1 turn is interesting because it means that the planeswalker themselves, are utilizing the ring as opposed to a creature in play as an equipment. From a gameplay perspective, I do think you'll be casting this off City of Traitors and Ancient Tombs in Legacy. I want to compare this primarily. I know I've mentioned Urza's Blueprint as a draw a card ability. The other one that's similar to it is Temple Bell in terms of combo potential. Temple Bell being a parallel draw where everyone draws a card. All of these things combo with Mind Over Matter to draw your whole deck and win with Thassa's Oracle or Labman or similar. But the card I really want to compare it to for older formats is Mystic Forge. Mystic Forge doesn't say tap draw a card, but it allows you to get card advantage by casting spells at the top of your library that are colourless, and it also allows you to tap to exile a card from the top of your library to dig 1 deeper, add shuffle effects to that and similar, and you get to sort of like dig through your deck. Does this replace Mystic Forge in strange mud and mono blue combo decks in Legacy? No, but I think you might go for a split now, bearing in mind this is obviously legendary, and of course Mystic Forge is not, but I do think that having access to the ability to just slam a load of mana into protecting yourself for an entire turn and passing back to your opponent for a setup turn is huge in the decks that utilize the wheels. You know, the old Hull Breacher mono blue decks in Legacy. 8cast to an extent might play this. The mono mud deck that I played on stream last year where we were using keys to untap mana rocks. Like firing one of these out off of a Basalt Monolith and untapping it with a Voltaic Key to draw 1 card and then 2 cards in the same turn whilst protecting yourself to untap on the following turn and draw 3 cards off it. So you've drawn 6 cards total off this fucking One Ring is incredibly powerful in a colourless deck. There's got to be a deck utilising this. I'm going to try playing in Legacy in those kind of shells. Soul Lands, Voltaic Keys, Mana Rocks, and you eventually win through, I don't know, massive, huge construct tokens, or maybe even an Aether Flux Reservoir kill here or there. And those decks exist in Historic Brawl as well. You know, the colourless decks utilising Ugin, for example, and comboing off with Flux Reservoir. I do think this might have a home elsewhere in spell-based combo as well by ritualing it out in maybe Modern or something. It just seems so unreasonably powerful in terms of the protection that it gives you against combo turns, because blanking a whole turn in Modern or Legacy is massive because you're expanding the game by 15 or 20% at times when people are trying to kill you nice and early before you set up and win through overwhelming advantage. I think this is already a card to watch, although we've only seen 2 cards revealed from the entire set. I assume this might be one of the most powerful cards in the set. I don't think everything's going to be at this power level because I think Wizards of the Coast might be trying not to have another Modern Horizons on their hands just to offset some of the criticism in the past. Ultimately, I'm very excited for Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. I'm not a die-hard fan that knows everything. I'm never going to pretend that. I will openly admit when I don't know what half the fucking places or people are called, but I love Lord of the Rings. I really do. And I've grown to love the crossovers in Magic. The Warhammer ones sold me so hard on how good and how well Wizards can do it. So I'm excited for this. I am just fearful of the fact that it's not a self-contained product you can buy. You gotta rip boosters for staples, and I'm scared of another Ragavan situation. I'm sick of expensive super staples in older formats. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Just a quick look at the One Ring primarily and the other bits and bobs. Smash that like button, don't forget to subscribe as well, and hit that bell and all that fucking shit. There'll be more videos tomorrow and ongoing as I ramp up back into normal content production, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.